recognizing a communist, physical appearance counts for nothing. If he openly declares himself to be a communist, we take his word for it. If a person consistently reads and advocates the views expressed in a communist publication, he may be a communist. If a person defends the activities of communist nations while consistently attacking the domestic and foreign policy of the United States, she may be a communist. If a person does all these things over a period of time, he must be a communist.
There are many communists in America today. They are everywhere, in factories, offices, butcher shops, on street corners. Attorney General Jay Howard. When most people think of the Red Scare, they think of Joseph McCarthy hunting down potential communists. But that was actually the second of two major Red Scares. The first Red Scare happened during World War I, after the Bolshevik Revolution in Russia. During the period after World War II, Americans became even more concerned that the totalitarian nature of communism, and they were afraid it would spread and infiltrate the United States. Congress created a committee called the House of Un-American Activities Committee. The committee investigated communist influence in America. Red baiting was the practice of identifying and attempting to out or uncover suspected communists within the United States government. Even Hollywood was believed to be infiltrated by communists. Those suspected of being communists were blacklisted. If you were blacklisted, you were either fired from job or denied work. Some blacklisted actors never worked in movies again. And because TV was financed by advertising dollars, anti-communist groups threatened to organize boycotts of shows if they employed blacklisted individuals. Afraid of having their products associated with anything un-American, sponsors would often respond by firing the suspected communist from the show they were producing. In fact, anything people tended to disagree with was labeled as communist. People speaking out against segregation, communist. That person doesn't like baseball, communist. You don't believe that America is the greatest nation on earth? You are communist. Explosive spy cases also made Americans afraid that communists were at work in the USA. A German-born physicist was convicted of providing the Soviets information about the atomic bomb project. It made the Soviets develop their own atomic bomb at least 1 year earlier than they would have on their own. Julius and Ethel Rosenberg were tried for providing Soviet spies with secret details about the atomic bomb. The Rosenbergs denied these charges, but they were found guilty and were executed in 1953. To make aggressive accusation without proof became known as McCarthyism. Senator Joseph McCarthy contributed to fears in the early 1950s by charging that communists were working inside State Departments. He claimed to have names of 57 people who were loyal to Communist Party. In fact, he made a bunch of fake documents and doctored photos of them hanging out with non-communists and submitted them as evidence against them. It was like if I took these pictures of me photobombing all these famous events in US history. You might assume I was time traveler, which I might or might not be. But anyone who questioned McCarthy were called soft on communism, and no one dared tangle with McCarthy for fear of being labeled as disloyal. Now, McCarthyism will not end until McCarthy claimed that there were communists in the US Army. That was one step too far. The gradual loss of public popularity or opposition from the US Supreme Court, led by Chief Justice Earl Warren. The Warren Court made a series of rulings that helped bring an end to McCarthyism. The amount of propaganda that Americans were exposed to at this time, emphasizing Americans' greatness and the evils of communism. It had infiltrated their beliefs and worldview, that even now, generations later, many Americans are still super wary of communism and even socialism. Kids grew up watching cartoons where the bad guys speak with thick Russian accents. That was intentional, to emphasize that who the quote bad guys were, while a small number of the accused communists may have been aspiring revolutionaries. Most others were the victims of false allegations, or had done nothing more than exercise their democratic right to join a political party. The Red Scare had continued to influence political debate in the decades since. McCarthyism, like the hysteria during the Salem witch hunts, is just another example of how unfounded fears can compromise civil liberties.
We're living in a country that's the finest place on earth, but some folks don't appreciate this land that gave them birth. I hear that up in Washington they're having an awful fuss, 'cause communists and spies were making monkeys out of us. And Congress has appointed a committee, so they said, to find out who's American and who's a low-down red. I wish they'd take and put me on the witness stand today. I'd yell so loud old Stalin could hear me all the way. I'm no communist, I'll tell you that right now. I believe a man should own his own house and car and town. I like this private ownership, I want to be left alone. Let the government run its business and let me run my own.
Explosive spy cases. I just sound Irish. Making aggressive, that's Scottish?